Hello, Dr. Watson and fellow viewers. My name is Chris Vigala. The video presentation you're about to hear is for class PS620 at Bellevue University. The research paper is titled Venezuela, Oil, Money, and Power. To begin, I will say Venezuela was recently added to the list of state sponsors of terrorism in March of 2015 by the United States because the government of Venezuela's actions undermined democratic processes or institutions and committed acts of violence or abuse of human rights, were involved in prohibiting or penalizing freedom of expression, and there were government officials involved in public corruption, and that in turn caused Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, aka FARC, to be, in my mind, total control. Who is FARC, you might ask? FARC is an estimated 8,000 member force established in 1964 as a military wing of the Colombian Communist Party. The FARC is Colombia's oldest, largest, and most capable and best equipped insurgency, taking in as much as $2 million a day in illicit drug proceeds. The FARC habitually used safe havens in Venezuela because of difficult terrain and the apparent policy of letting things take their own course without interfering. According to the International Crisis Group of Brussels, the weak link in Colombia's security policy was its undefended and open borders. Brazil and Peru have made serious efforts to prevent the FARC from using their territories, so why can't Venezuela? Venezuela and Colombia recently tried to strengthen its borders to prevent smuggling cheap drugs and weapons and etc. into each country to sell for profit, but they are not doing enough to prevent it from happening. Why? Because of the corruption. The time is now for Venezuela to change its ways. The corruption in Venezuela is not going to end overnight, but by implementing these practices now, which I'm going to speak about next, the corruption will end sooner rather than later. What Venezuela needs are policies that are working elsewhere. What better policies to replicate than the countries that are least corrupt in the world? None other than Denmark, New Zealand, and the United States, who are ranked in order 1st, 2nd, and 17th respectively, according to Transparency International. In order to prevent Venezuela from going down a path leading to the dark side, I will suggest a few ways best practiced by Denmark, New Zealand, and the United States. Venezuela needs to follow before the country spirals out of control. Venezuela now is what Denmark was, corrupted. When Denmark moved decisively to implement political modernization in the second half of the 19th century, the fundamental elements of control of corruption were already in place by the absolute monarch. The Danish example offers the first elements of what can be called modern control of corruption. A professional and decently paid bureaucracy selected by merit, which was carefully audited and regulated in order to protect public interest from undue private profit. This was done in a top-down manner in an effort to strengthen the state. The later extension of political rights and removal of old privileges was a gradual process that strengthened government impartiality and objectivity, increasing its legitimacy. This state-building process managed to preserve an equilibrium between the new and the old that did not grant any group enough power to become a predatory elite. Control of corruption evolved through a succession of equilibria that took at least a century as the modernization of the state by an enlightened despot was followed by a gradual transition to a more inclusive political society. Venezuela needs to implement anti-corruption agencies that mirror New Zealand's. New Zealand does not have any one single agency that tasked with fighting corruption. Unlike many other countries, it has not seen the need to create an independent commission against corruption. Rather, it has a number of agencies that focus on the different elements in the fight against corruption. Some of these agencies have their focus on the more positive task of reinforcing values to ensure that New Zealand maintains a corruption-free environment. Others focus on the environment of the laws and the rules. The two main law enforcement agencies responsible for anti-corruption investigations and prosecutions are the New Zealand Serious Fraud Office, the SFO, and the New Zealand Police. The powers of the director of the SFO go beyond those of the police in New Zealand. The director is able to issue a notice requiring the production of any information or documents that the director feels may assist the investigation. Furthermore, the director, by notice, is able to require any person appear before the director to answer questions. At such a compulsory interview, the person must answer all questions irrespective of whether those answers will incriminate that person or not. However, under the legislation, the director is not able to use any such incriminating answers and evidence against that person unless the person gives evidence inconsistent with their responses in any subsequent prosecution. As corrupt as Venezuela is, having just a single agency to combat the corruption is definitely not enough. They need more. My third and final suggested way to prevent corruption in Venezuela is for Venezuela to implement a whistleblowing law. Whistleblower laws are designed to protect and encourage voluntary policing of misconduct in public institutions by safeguarding and rewarding individuals who expose wrongdoings. In the United States, whistleblower laws have a long history and have been enacted by both the federal government and individual states. One of the first federal laws that protected whistleblowers was the 1863 United States False Claim Act, also known as the Lincoln Law, which is the act that designed to combat fraud by the United States government suppliers during the Civil War. In more recent times, the U.S. federal government enacted the Whistleblower Protection Act in 2007, which provides legal protections for whistleblowing activities or federal employees. In the past few years, whistleblowers have also been helpful in providing in private sector efforts to improve corporate governance. The whistleblower laws encourage whistleblowers by protecting them from wrongful dismissal, and in some cases, by promising them some percentages of the money recovered or damaged won by the government. Thus, not only is the act of blowing the whistle or exposing wrongdoing voluntary on part of the whistleblower, there are also potential monetary rewards. By doing this, everyone is held accountable at all times. Those that tell of corrupt policies will be rewarded, while those that offend will be convicted. Venezuela can't fight corruption by simply fighting corruption alone. Corruption is a symptom of a larger disease, the failure of institutions and governance, resulting in poor management of revenues and resources and the absence of delivery of public goods and services. Venezuela needs to be more strategic and rigorous, identifying and addressing corruption's underlying causes and examining the weaknesses in key institutions and government policies and practices. They have to focus their efforts on the broader content of governance and accountability. Once this happens, Venezuela will be removed from the terror watch list and will no longer be a threat to itself, the United States, and its allies. In ending, I would like to tell you a little bit about my overall experience with this research assignment. Back in my practical analysis paper, I wrote a few questions I felt I needed to know by the time I finished the research. I now know how to answer those questions. All due to the guidance of Dr. Watson, the questions that came to mind were what other countries and regions in the world are concerned with the same threat issue? What countries and regions of the world do not place a high priority on this threat issue? What are some of the current policies being employed by these other state regions in regards to the threat? What have been some of the successes and failures of the various alternative policies around the globe? What areas of joint communication, operation, or cooperation exist or should exist across countries dealing with this threat issue? And is there one state in particular that seems to be doing a better job than the United States that has concerns with this corruption? If you would like to reach out to me about any of the research I've done, I'll gladly chat with you about it. Thanks for watching my video presentation.